Good evening, everyone. I'm Let's Farm. I'm joined tonight by Sparrow and Drew, and anyone else who would like to click the link and come on up and chat about the election results and what happens next. So, who would like to begin? Because there's a lot to talk about.
Boy, I'll say.
I mean, I do believe that Sparrow has a list of things, and I mean, we could just even go over like just the promises that Donald Trump made, and do we think he's going to keep them or not?
Yeah,
Well, why don't we start with that?
Okay, we can start with
I
that.
do love tearing apart campaign promises, no matter who they're from.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, there were lots of them on both sides, but we really only going to have to contend with the side that won.
That's true.
So we should dissect them. Like,
Oh, absolutely.
what would be a big one? Mass deportations day one. What do
Oh,
you
yeah.
think?
I don't
I,
think it'll actually happen.
I was wondering about the logistics of it. I mean, are
hmm
they going to like go knock on doors? Need to see your green card or your papers, checking
Yeah, I
IDs.
don't think we're going to get a papers please situation. I honestly don't, and I honestly don't even think that it'll actually happen. I think this is just one of the many empty promises that Trump has made, just like he did in 2016 and didn't follow through on. Uh, there
Yeah,
will there will be some kind of symbolic gesture for it. Maybe he targets a city or state that has just pissed him off a lot lately, or maybe he just targets specific sanctuary cities that have declared themselves such. But I don't think it'll be mass deportation across the country. I think it'll be targeted. I think it'll be symbolic, and I think it'll just be done to hurt either prior political or opponents or prior business rivals, because he did a lot of petty shit the first time he was in office against former business rivals. So,
Well,
you know,
well, well. My thoughts on that targeting sanctuary cities and states and blue states and stuff like that would be that he starts rounding up people in those states, and that's going to turn. He had a pretty good Latin turnout this time. Latinos voted for him in huge numbers, and
well, specifically Latino men, Latino women did not.
right,
Majority of Latino women voted against Trump, but it was Latino men. But also, you have to take into account the consideration that the Latino community largely is very religious, and and the largest portion of that are Catholic. And Trump has declared himself nominally Catholic. I don't know how many times.
not. This is a purely hypothetical situation here, but say that there was an immigrant who was here legally and he had a job somewhere and he invited his family to come stay with him
hmm
and he was a Trump voter, right? Well, what happens if
hmm
they round up his family? I think next time he might vote Democrat.
It's possible, but I think it's a gamble that Trump is willing to make. Um, and this is coming kind of more from a Texas state of mind.
But you are
Uh,
in a border state, so
I am in a border state, but I also grew up not in a border town, but I grew up in one of the larger cities in Texas. I grew up in San Antonio, and there was a large legal migrant population and a near equally large illegal population. And this is going to be an anecdotal experience of the things that I saw and of how I saw people treating each other. But those who tended to be legal migrants were incredibly critical, generally rude, and honestly far more dismissive and aggressive towards uh, illegal or undocumented migrants than really any other population down there.
I think he's gonna talk a big game about mass deportation, but I think the focus is going to be at the border itself. Yeah.
It's possible. Like the focus will always end up being at the border, and he may try going federally. Like I said, after a couple of sanctuary cities or blue states that have sanctuary cities, that would be what would gain him the most political capital in the shortest amount of time, and I think would also allow him to do next to nothing but still put big numbers on the board. And Donald Trump is if nothing else, is a guy who likes to see numbers go up. He is in business
Right.
after all.
Yeah. That's true.
Well, I could see it be like a big push in the border in along the border states out. Yeah, that would their big thing in the promises was to secure the border.
Mm-hmm.
So that would make sense.
But securing the border in the terms that they want it secured, in the terms that several of the more extreme Trump voters, the more vocal Trump voters, tend to want.
Yeah, they want a Great Wall of China.
They do.
Yeah.
And Trump's not going to do that because that's not cost effective. He doesn't have a way to make somebody else pay for it. He doesn't have another way to shift the constructional or the fiduciary burden off onto anybody else.
And
And
that's
so and
that's not me
so what
typing this time.
no, that's Sparrow.
Oops.
And so what I think, and so that's why I think if there is any kind of deportation move, it'll be done to sanctuary cities because fairly low effort. You can send in ICE, maybe one or two local National Guard regiments, and you can put big numbers on the scoreboard in a very short period of time, and then it looks like you've done something, and that will appease the majority of his base to the point where they will no longer care if a wall actually goes up, or if they do, they're not going to make a big stink about it because after all, Daddy Trump did what he said on that thing. Maybe the other thing is just coming a little later.
Yeah.
So what was next on the promises list that you got?
Well, you got the notes today.
Well, no, well I've got a
I
topics
I I
list, but
I've run out of windows that I can have open, so let me look up.
No, I hear you.
we were
Um,
starting with just promises that he's made.
yeah.
Um,
The problem is that the majority of the promises that he has made over time, over this campaign, have been so I will say more appropriately vague, and that's not necessarily praise, is more of they were far more typical campaign promises like you would expect to see out of other politicians than they were in 2016. 2016, he was very specific about a lot of things. 2024, nowhere near the same level of specificity as him saying what he wanted to do or what was going to happen or what he was promising. And so it's gonna be more difficult to gauge. And I think that's because he kind of learned his lesson in 2016 of over promising and under delivering when he knows he needs to do the opposite of that.
All right, well, I found a list of some campaign promises he made, and the first one on the list, we got it right. We started with the mass deportation.
Yeah, that was the
Uh,
biggest one.
Next one, moves on the economy, tax and tariffs.
Yep, tariffs. We talked a lot about tariffs last night, so
Right,
if
right.
if people missed that, definitely go watch that one. We explained
Well,
a
in
bit more.
long story short, tariffs are going to
Everything's going to
drive up prices, and
Yeah, tariffs are going to make everything more expensive
exactly.
because it doesn't matter at what level of the economy you are playing at. There is at least 30 to 40% of the products you use or buy or eat or use to produce your own products that were imported from another country that we either don't have the capacity to manufacture ourselves or no longer have the capacity to manufacture ourselves because we moved to an import export commodity economy as opposed to a production economy.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I was going to circle back to this topic,
Okay.
um, because we hadn't really talked about um, like the housing market too much.
Yeah,
The cost of, buying a car, college costs, food. I mean, I know we did talk some about the food,
yeah.
but um, I don't know. What do you guys think about the housing market, the future of that? Because I mean, it's been shit for years.
So what I think is going to happen is it's gonna be a race to the bottom, truth be told, because we have a lot of states that missed the housing bubble burst in 2008. Texas was one of them. Housing prices stagnated, but they didn't fall like they did in the rest of the country, and then they started back growing again and again and again. We saw the same thing happen in parts of Northern California, and then a lot of those businesses and property management companies moved or set up shop also in Texas and some of the other states that did not experience the housing bubble burst from 2008, and they started the whole process over again. Um, there's bespoke debt collateralization, which is a different name for the same thing that's really ramped up the problems, which was the CDOs, the collateralized debt obligations. Um, a lot of people refer back to the movie. I think it's called The Big Short. It's got Steve Carell, a lot of fairly big name actors in there, um, and that does a decent job of explaining some of the problems. It doesn't convey everything, but let's be real. It's a dramatization. It's a movie. It's not going to tell the whole story. There
Okay.
are also plenty of other things there.
Two two
Um,
two things real quick.
yeah.
Real quick. The Fed did just cut the interest rates again, and Sweet Pea has a question in the chat.
Oh yes. What is her question?
She said Trump said he's going to reorganize the military, so we have generals that listen to him without question. Anyone else worried about that?
Oh,
Um,
military was one of my topics.
Ooh.
yeah.
Oh well, we will get to that then, Sweet
Yeah,
Pea.
we will definitely get to that next, especially considering some of the things
well,
that are in the mandate for leadership, specifically
well,
regarding the military,
but
that
no,
do mirror a lot of what Trump was saying.
well, the number two thing in his campaign promises had three parts, and we've only really covered tariffs, his moves on the economy, and taxes.
Well, let me finish what I was going to say about housing real quick. So it's going to be a race to the bottom between another housing bubble burst because it didn't burst completely like the tech bubble did, or the housing market is going to collapse, starting with single family homes and then eventually moving up the tiers into commercial real estate once the tariffs kick in, because it's going to insanely drive up costs, especially in commercial real estate, because commercial real estate relies a lot more on steel than single family and residential housing does. But residential housing, on the flip side, relies a lot on things like concrete and things like that. Which, while we do have concrete plants in the U.S., we still import a lot of it. We still
So,
import a lot of the core components before the mix actually happens.
so for the, I know you mentioned the 2008 situation. Are you
Hmm.
talking about how, like, okay, the refund?
No, 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 not no, not the refund thing. So 2008. That's when the housing market collapsed, and we saw several banks just completely go under because their entire um, fiduciary everything was balanced on the head of the pin.
Because
That was mortgage-backed securities, in particular companies like Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers, Goldman Sachs nearly completely collapsed,
there
but
was
they were
there
bailed
there
out.
was Well, because with um, that refund for the first time home buyers, like that's what I mean, I took part in that. That's when I bought my house. And it was a wonderful thing to have.
Mhm.
And I think Kamala said she was going to try to do that too.
Right,
But
but
and I
that
know that there was some fallout but I think the fallout where people had negative um, impacts from it was people were buying property that they couldn't afford.
well, it's
And
not it's not just that they couldn't afford it, but they were also pushed to buy it because that's what the economy was driving for.
well,
It started most heavily in the middle of Bill Clinton's first administration, his first term in the White House, and what we saw happen was subprime lending takes off and explodes, and you also have a lot of places um, where you see a lot of disaffected income earners, people with more chaotic income streams, people that worked in, say, the entertainment industry or in the wait staff industry, restaurant services, and things like that, especially waiters. This would also include people like strippers and exotic dancers, escort services. This would include people who had made careers as extras and background characters in TV and whatnot. Um, and because they had less stable income, they couldn't get a traditional mortgage, so they ended up in these subprime mortgages. But the problem is, it wasn't the refunds. The refunds weren't the problem. The problem was there were so many places that got involved in doing what are called subprime mortgaging, where
yeah, I know.
Oh,
they would get people in with teaser rates on their interest on their APR, and those teaser rates expire, and they did not do good jobs, if ever attempting in some cases, of explaining to people that they were getting these types of lending happening to them, um,
Right.
that
Yeah.
their rates were going to go up, and
Right.
it
We
was going to go
only
quickly.
Yeah, and we did a fixed interest rate loan.
Right.
Um,
That was not an option for subprime lending. All subprime lending was had a low introductory rate
yep.
with with a grace period that eventually would go up to whatever the interest rate should have been based on that person's actual qualifications at the time the loan was written, as opposed to where they were at the time the rate actually went up. There was never any reevaluation of credit worthiness or anything like that. So even if the person had, say, managed to use that time to build themselves up financially and develop some savings, maybe found a better career that paid well or got a promotion, this, that, and the other, they still suddenly were hit with these interest rates as if they were still making, $20,000 to $22,000 a year waiting tables and paying a sometimes upwards of 35% interest on their monthly payments, to the point where it
yeah,
was completely unsustainable. But the bigger
and
issue, but the bigger issue, even more than that, what most people don't talk about is the landlord class of people, because they were buying homes like this in extremely expensive neighborhoods, left, right, and center, and renting them out and renting them out as fast as they could, because they were using one home to pay off the mortgage for another and another and another,
mhm,
and created this daisy chain of fuckery that blew up in everybody's faces. So the refund was really the only good thing about that whole strategy, but it was not actually tied to subprime lending, which was the core criminal factor that led to the housing bubble burst in 2008. What really um, what really sunk it was the fact that, if we're being honest, the housing market had already collapsed in mid 2007. Like, it was already done because so many of those loans had already gone into default. But in an effort to try and essentially put a band-aid on a broken leg, the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, held off on reevaluating the credit status and the credit worthiness of um, of a lot of mortgage-backed securities, upon which, like I was saying, so many banks and indeed large portions of the economy had essentially hitched all their wagons to. And when mortgage-backed securities crumbled, everything else did too, and it wasn't refunds. It wasn't refunds that did that.
Yeah.
So
So,
who do we think he's gonna? Okay, if you keep going about housing, if you'd like. I don't know
oh,
where.
I was just gonna say we should.
Yeah, yeah. I think we did talk about. Yeah, well, let's go to
So,
military.
well, wait. We still haven't gotten on to the economy and tax
Oh shit,
proposals from Trump. We got
that's right.
we
I'm
got a little
sorry.
hung up on housing there,
We did.
and I'm curious as to he promised some tax cuts. Right now, the one was in that secret meeting down there in Mar-a-Lago, but I'm talking about the ones he said on the campaign trail.
Okay.
So he said he's going to cut taxes for working people. He's going to get rid of taxes on tips and no tax on Social Security.
So if that actually comes about, that will be one of the few good things that happens. If it actually happens,
Wait,
but
what
I
did you say
don't.
about tips?
Uh,
Trump
uh,
said he was going to eliminate taxes on tips.
Okay.
I mean, so that would so if that actually goes through, if that actually happens, then that will be good for people who work in food service and the gig economy that rely on tips. That will be one of the only good things. That said, um, at what cost? Because he still wants to push for the reduction in capital gains taxes, which so many people have railed against that really don't understand what it is, because they don't have the they are not wealthy enough
Let,
to
let, let's,
be
simplify,
impacted by capital
let's
gains
simplify it
taxes.
for him. Capital gains is when your money makes you money.
Essentially,
Pretty
yes.
simple.
Yeah, it's not just when your money makes you money, but when it makes you money in very specific ways.
Exactly. But it's
Usually when it comes through uh, essentially manipulation of the stock market and
exactly.
the gambles in that, because and the reason why those capital gains taxes have existed historically and have been higher, is generally because it only comes from the movement of money within the banking system and within the stock system. It's not actually adding or subtracting any real value to the economy. There's nothing being produced. It's only imaginary values getting shifted around an Excel spreadsheet.
Well, do you think there's a hope in hell for a tax cut for working people?
I honestly don't think it'll happen. I think he's gonna. I think he's campaigned on it, but it's not going to happen because when we looked at the Trump tax cuts, we saw time and again where it did not impact actual working class people as positively as it did the upper income classes, specifically those in the top 10% and higher. Now, granted, it doesn't take much to be in the top 10% of income earners. You can be in the top 10% of income earners when you're making as this is going to sound crazy when I say as little as, but in comparison to what the top 1% and the top 1% of the 1% earn, this is peanuts. You can be in the top 10% of income earners in the United States if you're making only about, I think it's like $110,000 a year. Now, that's a lot of money for a lot of us. That's a life changing amount of money for me if I were to make that in a year. That would be several times what I currently make. Um, but realistically speaking, that even though that's in the top 10% of income earners, that's still barely outside of what you would consider upper middle class.
Well, I all I can ever say about this is that it is absolutely ludicrous that if you work 40 hours a week, take no days off, no vacation days, no anything for a full week or for a full year on
Hmm.
minimum wage, you are well below the poverty line.
Oh, without a doubt,
Well
without
below it.
like well below.
So,
Poverty line is something like what the poverty line is currently listed as like what 27,000.
yeah, for a single
I
person,
want to say.
something like that. Well, I'm ready to move on from economics anyway. I'm done with that because we know he's going to add trillions to our deficit, and
Oh yeah,
it,
and for anybody who didn't want to run their calculator, 7.25 an hour at 40 hours a week, 52 weeks in the year. That's $15,080.
yeah, woo, yeah, you can survive on that.
Yeah.
If you don't like eating.
If you
Yeah,
live
if
in
you
a
don't like
tent,
eating, because that's not even going to pay for a one-bedroom apartment in most cities.
yeah, I mean, if you live in a tent under a bridge somewhere, maybe you can
We'll all just channel
survive.
our inner Chris Farley. I live in a van down by the
Down by
river,
the river.
Oh, 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 all right.
and then
Well,
we'll channel our what is it, Deftones, and eat our peaches that come in a can.
so what's next on our what's going to happen next agenda?
I
We
believe it's
should segue into the
military.
military spending and
Well, it's not like we don't have like we have the largest military budget on the planet.
Yeah, that's already nightmare fuel.
You know, yeah.
well,
Let's
I
add
mean,
fuel to the fire.
Well,
I
sure,
mean,
why not?
do you see him starting conflict? Do you see him cutting aid
Oh yeah,
Yes
to
and yes.
conflict
big
areas?
time.
I mean, like, there's so many things that can happen.
Yeah,
He's
Um,
immediately going to make concessions to Russia and Ukraine. Immediately.
possibly. What I think part of what kills me more than anything else is the fact that I'm sure people have probably seen this, but I'm gonna say it again anyways because it needs to be said. Trump hasn't expressly said this, but there are people on his staff that are that are on board with this, and that would be from the Mandate for Leadership, also known as Project 2025, from the Heritage Foundation. In particular, in the chapter about the Department of Defense, when they talk about needed reforms to rescue recruiting and retention, is to quote improve military recruiters' access to secondary schools and require completion of the ASVAB, that is the Armed Services Vocational Aptitude Battery, the military entrance exam,
Oh yeah.
by
mhm.
all students in schools that receive federal funding,
Oh,
which
North
the
Korea.
majority of private schools do not. So we're going to start rebuilding a class system or a caste system almost of where we're exclusively pulling our military personnel
Uh, do we?
from from poor and low income families.
We have a couple of questions here. Yeah. Well, not questions, but a comment. He's going. Sweepy says he's going to cut aid for Ukraine. I agree with that one. But she said, "Have we read Project 2025? I have not finished it, but I've read a good portion of it."
I have gone through quite a few chunks of it, but I also have been doing what the majority of people don't do, and that is going through and not just reading the Mandate for Leadership document, but also following up and checking the footnotes and going through and actually comparing the statements in Project 2025 to what their citations are, and then going and reading those citation documents, many of which lead back to articles that have been on the Heritage Foundation website, some of them for years, some of them for upwards of a decade in some instances, like that one thing that I talked about, the push for mandatory ASVAB testing in all schools that receive federal funding, which basically takes the vast majority of private schools off the menu for recruiting and focuses entirely on poor and low income areas. Um, that's from a document written by, if I remember correct, I think it was former Air Force general or former Navy admiral. Um, that was written back in 2014. That's a decade old document, and they've been pushing for that for over a decade. And people are just now actually looking. People are just now actually beginning to pay attention. And I think that says a lot. I think that says a lot about our society and us just not taking certain things seriously and then laughing at people who call it out or laughing at people who want to say, no, this is something they're asking for and they're not being quiet about it. This is going to happen if you let them do this. If you give them the reins of power, they will do it. And I think we're not going to see anything done about it, or we're not going to see people actually get mad about it in the numbers that they need to be mad about it until it actually happens.
Okay, so
And
what
if
else?
it's going to, it'll happen by 2026.
Which one? Who was it that quoted Trump saying that he wanted generals like Hitler had?
Uh,
Who was that?
well, I mean, he wanted generals that don't question his every move
Right.
or motive. But he's said that in multiple forms, going all the way back to about 2018. I mean, he's always kind of had a bone to pick with the Joint Chiefs for myriad reasons.
Apparently, he's never read the UCMJ either, because that says to obey all lawful orders.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
No. Trump wouldn't know the Uniform Code of Military Justice if it pitched a tent in his ass
I know it. I know it.
and made him march with it.
I'm pretty sure he hasn't
Yeah,
read the Constitution either. He even had it
yeah.
printed in his Bible.
We were talking about, yeah. Sweet Pea said kiss Medicare goodbye, and I was saying that, yeah, we kind of talked about that yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And that, yeah, I believe that for sure they will be slashed. The benefits will be slashed.
Yeah, and for those people wanting to say that, oh well, that just means veterans benefits are going to go up. No, says I.
Yeah,
No, says I.
as
Because
someone who lives under the VA healthcare system, I'm pretty much writing that off right now.
yeah,
So I think that now might be a good time to kind of talk about healthcare and slash abortion.
well,
Ooh, ooh,
I had one more
ooh.
thing I wanted to say about the military real quick, if that's
Okay,
okay.
quick. Yep, go
Quick,
ahead.
yeah, I'll keep it quick. So in the same document, the same DoD section of Project 2025 is talking about um, saying increase wages and family allowances for active duty. That's cool. But also audit all curricula and health policies in DoD schools for military families. Remove all, quote, inappropriate materials and reverse inappropriate uh, policies. And also support legislation giving education savings accounts options to military families. Now, a lot of people will think that that last one sounds good, but when you go and you start looking at the article for it, they actually want to uh, rip out and carve out sections from um, from the GI Bill and the Hazelwood Act, um, and essentially rob military members of their access to a college education post service.
That's insane.
But they're disguising it and couching it in as saying, "Oh, well, we're supporting legislation to give education savings accounts to military families," despite the fact that that shouldn't even be necessary because we give them their education for free as part of their compensation for being willing to do that for this country. But also to go back on what Sweet Pea was talking about with getting rid of a lot of generals and whatnot that want to question the Trumpster. Is this is also in 2025 as well, and they disguise it as saying, "Oh, we need to reduce the number of generals because this is due to pervasive rank creep." Now, as bureaucratic as a lot of the military is, and as much of a political game as the military is, once you get to an officer level rank and above, anyways, yeah, there is rank creep, sure. But they're saying that the actual battlefield experience of this officer corps is at an all-time low, and the next president should limit the continued advancement of many of the existing cadre who have been advanced by prior administrations for reasons other than their war-fighting prowess. So this is an incredibly jingoistic, very hawkish take on what our military should be. Anyway, that's all I had for that. I just wanted to get that last bit out there to kind of bolster what Sweet Pea was saying and say that it's not being done without support at it by any means.
So healthcare. Want to start there, or just jump right in both feet into abortion? Which one?
I say jump both feet in.
All
Do I
right.
think a federal
Mm-hmm.
do I think a federal abortion ban will happen? I don't think it will. Or if it does, it won't be tried until I think 2027 on his way out the door. If it happens, it'll be 2027. It'll be 2027, or it'll because I think they want to get past midterm elections.
Well, yeah,
Um,
that would entirely depend on how the midterms go.
True, but if they're seeing that they can get to a point where they can have a total cloture vote and override a filibuster, that's what they're waiting for. And that's why I say if we're going
Well,
to see something like that happen,
where
the
where
only way it ramrods through
where would
is
that
through
fall?
measures such as that, and it'll be 2027.
Where would that fall? I imagine a lot of states would have problems with that and would file, cases about states' rights versus federal rights.
True, they would, but all that's going to happen is we have an incredibly hardcore right leaning Supreme Court, which will just rule on based on the supremacy clause, like they had done or tried to do for drug laws for a number of years, and with there being multiple, essentially, with there being multiple appointees on there from Trump's previous administration, in the forms of the likes of like Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. They will probably rule in favor of federal supremacy under the supremacy clause, and then we have with Trump in the White House for the next 4 years, we're probably going to see more even further right leaning appointees get put into justice positions on the Supreme Court due to Clarence Thomas expressing his wishes to retire, as well as Sam Alito.
Sweet Pea says in the chat that Trump's already going after trans people's health care. If she'd like to elaborate on that a little bit. Um, I
Yeah,
I
Well, I have a huge problem with not only the abortion ban, but um, I mean, going so far as to deny care when someone's had a miscarriage, causing them to die, is just
and if you look it up medically, a DNC is not an abortion.
yeah,
So
right. That so it's just you're letting something dead stay inside you
until you
and
become septic and
cause
die
sepsis.
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, and then you get sepsis and you die. Um, or it being nearly taking an act of Congress. But there were a couple of articles. I think was it Tennessee or Alabama? It was Tennessee or Alabama, I want to say, where a woman had to fight tooth and nail to uh, get an ectopic pregnancy
Ooh.
removed.
Yeah, well,
That nearly killed her.
that'll kill them
Uh,
both.
And then there was two women from Georgia that also died after they couldn't access legal abortions
Right.
yeah,
and timely medical care.
And well, in during the election, what was it, 7 out of 9 states that had it on the ballot, it passed.
Yeah, they passed some form of state constitutional protection
Abortion. Yeah,
for abortion for women's health. Yeah,
right.
which that was a good thing to see. But again, with the looming threat of potentially a federal abortion ban, which again I can't stress enough, this will be one that if it comes, it's gonna come after midterms, or if they think they're going to lose midterms, they're going to try and ram it through before the election cycle happens.
Well,
I mean,
I
we just had a teenager, from Texas. I'm sure
Yeah.
you guys heard about, that recently. So is it like my thoughts are, is this going to be a continuing problem?
and Sweet Pea says in the chat that Trump promises rollback on trans people's rights and said he would undo a new Biden administration policy that will offer protections for trans people. And he said that Friday. Yeah, unfortunately, in America, that's something that if it's not in the Constitution, if it's a law that they've made, or especially an executive orders only last till the next administration generally,
Yep.
because they can just be undone by the next president quite easily.
Mm-hmm. Unless there's a specific sunset clause put
Right,
in there that is upheld by the DOJ and the Supreme Court.
right. Well, in
That
this
doesn't
case,
happen
I
very
don't
often.
think that's going to happen if there was one.
No, no, they don't happen often.
So yeah, anything you know that was enacted by an executive order can be just as easily undone.
Yeah, and that's I think that's why when I say a federal abortion ban, look for it in 2027, is because he doesn't want to do it and spend his political capital on that on an executive order, because it's not going to stay. It won't stay. It may do some damage in the short term, but it'll kill them at midterms, and then we'll see Democrats take back at least one of the two houses of Congress if he does anything at the federal level with abortion via an executive order. If he's going to play that card, it'll be 2027. Mark my words on that.
He's going to undo the bathroom laws. Sweet Pea says.
Oh, yeah, the bathroom laws. There's also rolling back to military for just a moment.
Right,
Uh, they want to kick out anybody in the military who is trans or even just experiencing gender dysphoria. This also extends to people who have HIV, which the HIV thing I can kind of understand, because in a situation, in a battlefield situation, there is now suddenly a very real risk that you could infect another person that way.
right.
Um, and so like through emergency transfusion through a wound. And so it's like that one thing I can kind of understand, um, but essentially the whole reason for wanting to kick trans people out of the military, at least the what they're trying to couch it in, is in terms of it's going to cost the military more money to keep them in uniform. Get rid of them.
Well, what she's saying about going after trans kids? I mean, are they going to like do something about gender affirming care? You think? I mean, he's going to put RFK in charge of that, and that guy's
Yeah. Um,
a
I
real
mean,
piece of work.
so Medicaid at the federal level will most likely be gutted. State level Medicaid already doesn't handle the vast majority of forms of gender affirming care. Um, that ends up being an out of pocket expense for parents, um, and patients. So I don't see much changing as far as that goes. I just see, if anything, if it doesn't go backwards, because most of those decisions are being made on a policy level usually by insurance companies, as opposed to actual regulations in place. Um, what I do see happening though, is I do see things like, um, the DeSantis Don't Say Gay bill that came about in Florida in 2021. I see that creeping up and creeping into public schools across the country, especially in the hardcore conservative states, or at least ones that have hardcore conservative leadership. Um, and I see the traditional spaces that are supposed to be safe for trans kids to be able to talk to people, sometimes even outside their own families, are going to go away, or at least there's going to be a severe chilling effect through laws such as that DeSantis Don't Say Gay bill,
Right.
which basically would end up blackballing and criminally prosecuting and opening teachers and administration up to civil prosecution uh, by parents
We
just for doing something as simple as acknowledging that HIV existed and that gay people exist.
we've covered numerous topics that I know that Sparrow has a vested interest in, and she's just not saying a whole lot.
Oh well, I'm not trying to interrupt people.
Well,
It's all good.
well, I
You're
mean,
fine.
it
But yeah,
well,
no, I'm done. I've rambled a lot, so please, please come in here.
well,
No,
well,
it's okay. It's
well,
okay.
and next on the list of his campaign promises was to cut climate regulations.
What
I,
Oh
climate
yeah.
regulations?
Well, we
I
know how much he hates windmills.
yeah,
They'll catch his toupee, man.
yeah, he might blow it off if he gets too close. But yeah, and the sound
They'll
causes
ru-
cancer, of course.
they'll ruin that sexy comb over.
But I mean,
Jesus.
he already deregulated last time he was in there on a bunch of things, and I have
Yeah.
no what else could he do? Oh wait, one more thing from the let's jump back for a second. It says Trump. Sweepy says Trump is stopping any and all gender affirming care.
Yeah.
Is
So the thing is that there's not really a lot he can do because most of those because there's not really legislation that actually governs a lot of that.
that's what I was
Um,
thinking too. That it would be
uh,
hard to legislate that.
yeah, it's gonna be really difficult for them to legislate it. Abortion is a very niche, very specific thing because it was couched in constitutionality under Roe v. Wade, specifically under the 14th Amendment, with what was referred to as substantive due process.
Right.
Um, and so that hasn't happened with anything else. The reason why abortion is such a big sticking point is because it becomes a policy, is because it's become a policy point because it has been couched in whether or not Roe v. Wade was constitutional, and that's been a question that goes all the way back to Roe v. Wade because a lot of people don't realize that even before the Dobbs decision, there were three or four others prior to that, like Casey and Oyez and I can't remember the other one, but there were three or four other abortion cases that went to the Supreme Court before the Dobbs case did. So that's been a pretty back and forth constitutional question in the U.S. for 50 years, unfortunately.
And now
Uh,
and
whereas whereas transgender affirming care has largely stayed in the medical field where it should have been this entire time. Same with abortion.
yeah, well, yeah. Well, since we were on abortion, I've had that discussion numerous times here at my house and with friends, and they keep wanting to ask me my opinion. And I say, look, I'm not a doctor, especially an OBGYN, and I don't have a uterus, so my opinion shouldn't matter. I mean, yeah, I have one, but it shouldn't
Yeah,
matter.
I mean, if you're
That's between a woman and
and
her
a doctor,
doctor.
yeah,
Exactly.
I agree.
So my opinion does not matter.
I agree because you can't make an argument based on when life begins because we can make clear, convincing scientific arguments for life beginning anywhere from about 1 billion years ago to the point of conception to almost any developmental point within a pregnancy. To the point that would Also, especially
Well,
if you want, if you want to talk about just any of it, you
and
could make arguments that it should be illegal to eat chicken eggs
well,
because you
listen.
could argue that that would be against abortion
Well,
laws in some
listen.
states.
In nature, just in nature, it's been shown that you know, generally right around 70% of fertilized human eggs never attach to the uterine wall.
Yeah,
And
which
so
which means if we legislate based on fertilization,
every
that means
every
every woman's a serial killer.
when she has a period, she becomes, you're committing murder.
Yeah, you become a serial killer.
So yeah, well, I'm loving what Sweepy is writing in in the chat. She said that Friday Trump stated that he wants to take America back to the 1920s because he thought those times were great and perfect.
Yeah, let's see the Volstead Act, Jim Crow laws.
Good stuff.
More
Oh yeah,
Flappers, yep,
prohibition.
flappers, bathtub gin, good stuff.
I
Well, I
mean,
mean, what are these people going to do? These women are going to have to go do these back alley, abortions or, um,
yeah,
Yeah, that's going to come back. And she also says that Trump's going to ban any abortion medications, equipment, or materials from being sent through the U.S. Postal Service, kind of like what they did with vapes.
yeah.
yeah, we'll have to see how things go, but it's not looking very great.
No,
So,
definitely not.
and then,
so we've covered several things. Do you
and
have another list item that
well,
you want
I
to?
was I was reading the comments in the chat real quick because Zero says that Project 2025's attacks on issues impacting people with disabilities, including transportation, healthcare, K-12 students, benefits, housing, and more, are addressed. That
Yes,
probably means that autistic children who desperately need a diagnosis will be impacted for the rest of their life.
absolutely.
Oh yeah, yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Yeah, we're already seeing effects of like the damage he did to the Medicaid system. Like I've seen that happen real world. I won't go too much into detail because that could potentially dox myself or dox others. But let's just say some people very close to me who have daughters that I consider my nieces is currently dealing with that issue to where it is right now she is she's 4 years old and is going to be stuck waiting until she's nearly 6 or older to even be able to go to school because of how badly um, autistic children are dealt with in the Texas educational system. Because she needs the diagnosis to be able to function in school, to get the help that she needs on an educational level. And the wait list for even get an assessment for a diagnosis is upwards of 2 years at this point, and that's
Yeah,
just
I'm kind of going through a similar situation too on that.
I'm so sorry to hear that. That's I would not wish that on Donald Trump himself, and I do not like that man.
Well, it's strange because he alluded to his youngest son being autistic um, during his last presidency.
And the thing I hate about it the most is the first thing that comes to mind is it actually true? Because Trump has lied
So much.
so
Uh,
much that it's directly affecting those that arguably should be close to him.
that man lies.
Um,
That man lies like the rest of us breathe.
yeah, I honestly believe that there have been times where I have heard him tell more lies in one sentence than there were words in that
Yeah,
sentence.
somehow he defies physics that way. Yeah, he's good at
I
that.
keep thinking this one thing, like he's going to be the first ever, as seen on TV, president. And like it's just it's laughable and also sad.
It
Um,
is.
he's got all of these products, and it's almost like an as seen on TV situation. It's like, but he's got all this bullshit for sale with his name stamped on it.
I mean, if we're gonna get that Can we have a recall vote and elect a slap chop to be president
Yeah,
instead?
yeah, please. Billy
Oh,
Mays.
remember the other guy?
Let's elect the
Pat
ShamWow guy.
The
Let's elect let's get
Vince.
ShamWow.
Vince. Let's let Vince. Let's let the ShamWow guy. Let's grab a Ouija board, hold a séance, and resurrect fucking Billy Mays. That
Billy
way,
Mays.
because I will listen to
Wait,
OxyClean infomercials at the State of the Union address to I could make it through 4 years of that.
let's really resurrect the dead and bring back the father of all of that shit, Ron Popeil.
Oh
Bring back
God,
Ron Popeil with the hair,
jeez,
with the
dude.
spray paint for your head, and you
Oh
know,
God, yeah, yeah. Back before they had even gotten to the first like hair plugs thing where they were like stapling ant legs to your forehead.
yeah, no, he just
You know,
spray paints your head.
I heard the ShamWow guy passed away.
Did he?
Vince? I don't think
Wow.
so.
Well,
I
speaking
need
of
to look
pillows,
that up.
I can't wait to hear Secretary of State my pillow guy.
No, no, not Mike Lindell. Not Mike
Oh
Lindell.
God.
No, no, no.
After everything he's
Yeah,
done, he's
no.
got to give him a position somewhere.
You know, oh, and on the topic of weird,
Nah, Vince is Vince
weird,
Offer isn't
goofy,
dead. He's alive. I had to look it up.
weird
He's
and
60. He's
goofy
older than I thought he
topics.
would be.
Um, what about the Space Force? We never really hear much about Donald Trump's Space Force anymore.
Well,
We really don't, but that was
As a Gen Xer, I'm still pissed off about Reagan's space lasers. Whatever happened to our space
Star
lasers?
Wars. Yeah,
Yeah, I wanted space lasers, and we didn't get them.
So
yeah.
do
Well,
you think he's gonna do anything with his Space Force?
I don't know. I honestly don't think he will because to to be honest, I honestly think the most damaging thing to the Space Force was that Steve Carell series that came out on freaking Netflix. Because right after that came out,
Hmm.
you stop hearing about anything Space Force related. It is never mentioned again. As soon as that series came out and people started watching it, just radio silence. Just nobody said a damn thing about it again. And I honestly think that that show potentially killed Space Force, or at least did a lot of damage to it to where they're not gonna talk about it.
Well, the damn thing still exists, and we're
Well,
putting
yeah, it still
a lot of
exists.
money into it.
Yeah.
And
I haven't.
they have launched a couple of rockets, and they're working on a space plane that I
I
know of.
haven't heard anything.
They've also been working on things like scramjet technology for decades
Oh
now.
yeah.
Um, I don't know. Maybe Donald Trump will draft Elon Musk and make him the director of the Office of Space, director of Space Force.
Now that wouldn't surprise me one bit.
It wouldn't. It wouldn't. And then we would truly get idiocracy. It would be Space Force, brought to you by SpaceX.
Well,
Oh
we are getting a lot of comments. Like Project 2025 includes plans to defund Gallaudet University, the global leader in education for deaf and hard of hearing students in Washington, D.C., and other disability institutions funded by the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services, part of the Department of Education.
Yep. Yeah, people don't realize that killing the Department of Education essentially will
It,
end the
yeah,
majority of those OSER institutions.
exactly. And then,
Hey, Department of Education was on my list. Let's
right,
do it.
well, and other OSER funded institutions include the Helen Keller National Center, the National Technical Institute for the Deaf, and the American Printing House for the Blind.
So yeah, the majority of Braille publications are funded through OSER,
Mm-hmm.
and you will stop seeing Braille publications for many textbooks. Also, one thing I've got to come back to just for a brief moment. Vince Shamwow guy
Mm-hmm.
goes by the name Vince Offer. His he is an Israeli American immigrant, and his real full name is Offer Shlomi.
Really?
Yes, I'm sorry. It caught me so off guard. I had to mention it. I'm like, that's not something I expected to see because like he had just that hardcore like Brooklyn accent kind of thing going
Yeah,
on, and so it's like I don't know. I just kind of like get caught off guard by that for a moment. I'm like, huh, that's kind of cool. But anyways,
and
sorry.
and and, uh,
Back to our regularly scheduled dystopian diatribes.
and another one said, and a comment from Sweepy says Trump has claimed he doesn't know what it is or who is involved, though he does indeed know many of the people involved. Perhaps more importantly, his policy plans often align with what's in Project
Yeah,
2025.
he had people on his staff that worked for the Heritage Foundation during his first term as president. He had people that were on his staff during his first term as president
And
that went to work at the Heritage Foundation.
and he
It's complete
implemented
lies.
and he implemented 67 things from Project 2021
Yeah,
in his administration. 67 of them, because they put one out every 4 years.
they do. They put a mandate for leadership out every
Every
4
4
years.
years. So yeah, and we never heard about it until like really recently.
No,
Um,
because nobody paid attention to it.
right. But then suddenly Trump becomes president, and now it's big news.
Yeah, well, I mean, like it's been newsworthy for a while because it was essentially part of like the Orange Man Bad Strategy campaign that was largely what Kamala Harris ran on, and that's part of that was part of the problem. That's part of why she lost. Is Biden had the political capital to run that kind of a campaign? She didn't. But when you're thrust into having to run, and you're basically just said, "Hey, here you go do this, kid," you really don't have any time to try and scramble and re-strategize. So she was dealt a bad hand from the get go.
So now, do we know yet who's going to be in charge of the Department of Education?
They don't want to have one.
Yeah, they want to try to get rid of it now.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
What I think will happen what I think will happen is I think um, they will appoint someone to chair the Department of Education for the express purpose of attempting to dismantle it from the inside out. Who they will choose to do that? That I don't know. I can't. All the people that I would consider cartoonishly evil enough to do that are already in the cabinet in other positions, and so it's like I don't know, and
Do you
that's
remember? Do you remember that one guy? Um, I think he was in charge of the DOE for a while. He was the brain surgeon guy who looked like he had chronic narcolepsy.
we talking about Ben Carson. No, he was the HUD chair,
Yeah, he.
Housing and Urban Development
Okay.
chair. He
Yeah.
wasn't Department of Education.
Oh,
Uh,
Okay.
we had Betsy DeVos.
Oh yes. Okay. Got him
Um,
mixed up.
yeah, um, there was that bit, but I don't think she's extreme enough for him anymore.
Is Ben Carson even involved in these things anymore?
Yeah, he wrote a chapter for Project 2025.
Oh Jesus.
Yeah,
Yeah, I have
he
not
contributed
read
a
the
fair
whole
bit.
thing.
right. And basically, I haven't read the whole thing either. I got it. The way it's written is kind of boring and hard to read, but I got
Oh,
through.
it's meant to be.
I got through quite a bit of it, and then I watched a video from an economist who was talking about where the economic parts of it would get us,
Yeah.
and that scared the hell out of me. But Sweet Pea apparently has read more of it because she said each agency chapter there are suggestions for how more nonpartisan civic employees in the federal government could be turned into political appointees who would be beholden to the Trump agenda and less
Hmm.
likely to push back on policy change. And yes, I do know they said something about getting rid of a whole lot of civil servants.
Yeah, they did, and specifically, Benjamin S. Cawson, Senior MD, contributed chapter number 15 in section 3, the general welfare, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, starting on page 503 for anybody that's masochistic enough to want to go read that
Oh boy.
Um,
more than I have.
Yeah, he's the only thing you heard about Ben Carson in the first administration was that he spent $50,000 redecorating his office.
Yeah, but suddenly he's an authority on how HUD should be run, even though he didn't do anything else but redecorate his damn office.
I know, I know, but yeah, he has all the answers now. Weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, he acts like he did brain surgery on himself, to be honest.
It kind of feels that way.
Gave himself a trypanasia,
Yeah.
bored a hole in his
Oh,
skull.
so here's a fun thing. We were talking about Space Force a minute ago. I'm going to read this quick little excerpt. This is on page 855 for Mandate for Leadership. It's called Advance America's Space Leadership. One of the most significant technological developments in the past few years has been the emergence of a new generation of low Earth orbit satellites like Starlink and Kuiper. This tech can beam a reliable high-speed internet signal to nearly any part of the globe at a fraction of the cost of other technologies, has the potential to significantly accelerate efforts to end the digital divide and disrupt the federal regulatory and subsidy regime that applies to communications networks. The FCC should expedite its work to support this new technology by acting more quickly in its review and approval of applications to launch new satellites. Otherwise, the U.S. risks ceding space leadership to entities based in countries with a more friendly regulatory environments.
And weirdly, those are Musk projects. At least one of
Yeah,
them, Starlink, is.
I believe both of them
I think
are,
he's
or is Kuiper Amazon's baby?
I'm
I
not
can't
sure.
remember.
I You have the ability to Google it.
That's true.
I got all of my windows and screens taken up right
Yeah,
now.
I'll take a quick second if y'all want to talk about something else for a second.
Well,
Well, I was gonna kind of talk about. Oh, I'm sorry.
go ahead. No, please.
It was just it was kind of on the heels of the education. Um, Talking about a little bit more about the religion in schools.
I was right. Kuiper Systems LLC, also known as Project Kuiper, is a subsidiary of Amazon. Mm, sorry, I felt really good about that one. Of being able to call that. No, like I feel. Anyways, sorry. It's like I know my billionaire bullshit. Sorry.
I know we touched on it yesterday a little bit, but the religion in schools issue is going to be a problem for a lot of people. I
Yeah, it
think
is.
that's going to cause issues. People are
I.
going to want to.
Mm-hmm.
They're either going to be all for it or they're going to want to take their kids out of school.
Yeah, and the problem is that transitioning to homeschool isn't any better because the vast majority of homeschooling resources and curricula are built part and parcel by religious organizations.
Well, the K-12 program, I did that with each of my children
Mm-hmm.
for a year, and it was actually pretty good. Um,
Okay.
I actually was pleasantly surprised at their curriculum.
Okay.
I did the K-12 program through a virtual charter school here in Pennsylvania with my youngest son until he hit 8th grade.
Okay.
And yeah, when he went and took his assessment test for 8th grade, they were like, "You sure he's not in ninth?"
Well,
Okay.
that's the thing. That's the thing. The K-12 virtual academies, and they all have their own little name depending on what you know what kind of district you're in. Like mine was WAVA, but it was still under the umbrella of the K-12,
Yeah.
and they actually they require a lot more from students than in your standard brick and mortar school. Um, they have kind of a higher you know
They
they
do.
have a higher expectancy of so it's kind of like you're learning stuff that you'd normally learn in the next grade. You're already learning it, you know.
Well, when we were doing it through the Pennsylvania Virtual Charter School, um, we had to go every year for an assessment test to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that and he also had to turn in assignments and a lot of things. Fourth grade, very first book report the kid gets, he picks reading War of the Worlds. I'm like, really?
That's a fun book.
Yeah, but for a fourth grader, but he got it. So
I
yeah,
mean,
I was impressed.
I one of my first book reports was also on War of the Worlds, and it was also in fourth grade.
Why'd we all pick old books? I did 20,000 Leagues.
And yeah, that was a good one too. Um, my second one was on um, the Tom Clancy novel, The Bear and the Dragon.
Oh, well, then Trump says he's going to end the Ukraine war day one, basically.
Okay, so that's
Day,
either
day,
boots on the ground or I don't think it'll be nukes. It won't be nukes.
what's he going to do? Like, if you don't stop now, I'm going to nuke you? That, is that,
Uh,
Or
yeah,
cutting off all the aid.
yeah,
well, then
yeah.
that'd just be giving Ukraine to Russia.
That ends the conflict day one.
Yeah, it does. It's over, I guess.
I mean that he didn't say how you'd end it. He just said he would.
This is true.
That's why I say that his stuff was much more appropriately vague, politically speaking, as far as his campaign promises this time around. And so a
He
lot of
just,
what we have is going to be speculative.
I think he just thinks that he's such a good leader that he can just talk with these other leaders and then make the peace.
Yeah.
Or I,
Oh man.
I think that he has some kind. I don't know. He has this grandiose, you know, view of himself.
Yeah, he definitely has delusions of grandeur for a lot of things.
Oh, yeah,
But
he's
when it
better at
comes to public
everything.
speaking, I think it would be more appropriately diagnosed as delusions of adequacy.
Yeah. But yeah, cutting off all their aid so that they can't. I mean, because I don't know how many drones. Gosh, the videos I've seen. I mean,
Hmm.
they're using, and which is crazy because that changes the whole game with war.
Yeah.
You know, all these drones, it
Hmm.
changes everything.
Yeah,
You
because it
know,
completely depersonalizes killing large numbers of people.
Oh, yeah, it does.
I mean, they can attach weapons to it, or they can just use them for scouting and then finding locations.
Yeah, but if we're gonna really lean into that, I think we should just go ahead and combine the technology of tomorrow with the technology of yesteryear and make our first intercontinental ballistic pigeon.
No, geez.
We already tried with chicken and pigeon guided missiles. That was one of the first attempts at an air to ground at an air to ground guided missile
So
was
like,
was training pigeons to or chickens to peck at images of a submarine to keep crosshairs on it. Like that was a legitimate thing that was done by DARPA.
so homing pigeons will be like
Yeah,
homing missile pigeons.
yeah, intercontinental ballistic pigeons. Let's go. Come on, if we're gonna speed run into oblivion, I want to see some funny shit. Damn it.
Well, I still want him
Oh,
to admit that Reagan made space lasers and that they're up there.
I I don't think that actually happened. I think a lot of what they tried to focus on more than anything else was instead of lasers was the whole concept of rods from God.
The
The
tungsten telephone
Yeah,
poles dropped from space.
the non ballistic kinetic non nuclear non ballistic kinetic weapons. The problem with that, of course, is
Getting them up
how are
there.
you going to get a tungsten rod that size into space? It is so
Yeah,
ungodly heavy
yeah.
for people who don't understand how friggin' dense tungsten is. Okay, the rods from God are supposed to be like 100 feet long and nearly a foot in diameter. A cube of tungsten that is 1 inch by 1 inch by 1 inch weighs a pound.
Oh yeah, it's dense.
So scale that up to a
And,
cylinder
and,
the size of a tree trunk, the
and
size
then
of
you
a telephone pole.
and then you go, why don't they use even denser metals? Well, because lead and gold would burn up on reentry and just
Well,
melt.
lead and gold are nowhere near as dense as tungsten.
Well, they would melt anyway.
Yes, they. Oh, well, yeah. Uh, lead will melt in a campfire,
Oh yeah. Used to
and
melt
that's
it.
still
Used
not
to
even the
melt it on the
craziest
kitchen
one.
stove and make sinkers.
Yeah, or you have gallium, which
Melts in your
is
hand.
like the forbidden M&M. It melts in your hand, and it's not supposed to go in your mouth. Um, and then you have mercury, which is a metal that has a boiling point below the freezing point of water.
So yeah. Then next on his agenda, according to his campaign promises, is, and this I noticed from earlier in the campaign until closer to election day, he changed his statement about the January 6th rioters or hostages, as he calls them. In the beginning, he was going to pardon all of them. All of them.
Okay.
Closer toward election day, he said he's going to pardon some of them.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know what some of them means. Maybe he's just talking about the ones that didn't like get convicted of violent crimes. I have no idea.
Maybe either that, or maybe he's only going to pardon the ones that are currently serving prison sentences and isn't going to bother with the ones that are on probation.
Oh, he'll leave them with having a record? What a nice guy.
Yeah, yeah. But also probably scaling it back by saying some instead of all, because there are several that have been charged with state level crimes uh, by Maryland, and also by just DC Metro, and not at the federal level. So
Well,
maybe,
there were at least four that were charged with weapons possessions for DC. That's a violation.
yeah.
Um, I don't know about many others. Did they ever find out who had the bombs in the car thing?
I don't I don't remember. I don't remember.
I mean, they left them in the car or whatever, but
Yeah.
they
Uh,
found those, and I never heard much about that.
Yeah. Chances are they may not be able to trace the materials, because if depending on what you make a potential incendiary device or improvised explosive device out of, it can make it nearly impossible to trace. I mean, look at what happened with Ted Kaczynski in
Right,
the 90s.
Mhm.
It
right.
was he was tracked based on, like, he was found based on how he communicated, not based on how the bombs were constructed. He was traced based on how he communicated and the mail routes
And
by which the
and
explosives were sent.
the man was a legitimate genius, just a little cracked.
True, true. I mean, just MK Ultra fried his brain.
Yeah,
Um,
little cracked.
yeah.
So, but how? I mean, does that bother you at all that he's going to pardon people who attacked the Capitol?
Uh,
It
but
bothers me.
it's bothersome, yes. Um, in the long run, will it do as much damage as any number of the other things that he says he wants to do? That's where I start to get into the area of I'm not sure. Like, yeah, January
It's gonna
6th,
set kind
the
of a
political conditions,
precedent, though.
it'll set a precedent. Yes, it's gonna send a message. It's not gonna send a good one,
Right.
but
Exactly.
ultimately, the potential damages of that action is from from a from a truly as peeled back, coldly clinical analysis as possible. The reaches that will go to, the impact that will have in the long run, is far more nebulous and far less measurable at this point in time than anything else he's going to do or has said that he wants to do. And so I don't really see generally what good speculating on it does, aside from keeping it in people's mental real estate. And I think the best thing for that, or the worst thing for Trump, and the worst thing for the J6 rioters, um, um, that could possibly happen, is if as many people as possible just completely fucking ignore it, because that will damage their message. That that will rob them of legitimacy, because they're going to thrive on capitalizing on people hate watching content that they make, hate watching interviews that they do, um, having people make video after video about them, and then they turn around and try to sue them for defamation or any number of things, and that will breed legitimacy for what they want. And I think the best thing, in large part, that we could do, should these people get pardoned, is to ignore them and let them just fade into memory, and just ignore that the pardon occurred.
Not make a big deal out of it. Just
Yeah, not make a big deal out of it, because there are far many other things that are going to be more immediately damaging and are going to have longer running and farther reaching implications, and impact far more people than these dipshits will. Because if we make a big deal out of it, they're going to be the next breed of Alex Jones.
Oh God, watch him be the communications director.
Or the press secretary.
Oh yeah, one of them. That'd be hilarious.
That's a dumpster fire waiting to happen.
Oh my
I
God,
kind
yeah.
of want to see. I kind of want to see him. I kind of want to see him on the podium, because that's when. Because honestly, and here's the thing. I think, if anything else, having someone as cartoonishly moronic and terrible a person as Alex Jones as your press secretary might actually do more damage to them on the whole than anything else. And so I want to see Alex Jones on that podium, doing the press gangs. I
That'd
want to see
be-
Alex Jones up there trying to hawk his super male vitality horse shit
so,
while on the podium. I want to see a little vial of that bullshit in a bottle right there next to the microphone bank,
so
as he's trying to tell people in his rant and rave about the gay frogs and the globalist elite trying to kill us all with fluoride in our tap water. Um, I want to see that happen,
oh,
because I think that will damage. I think that will do more damage than good.
speaking of which, that's RFK's agenda day one, getting the fluoride out of the water.
Yeah.
So I was just going to suggest we move on to RFK Jr. because
No timing,
that's, yeah,
timing.
I don't know. My notes just say RFK Jr. WTF.
I don't think you need to say much more about that guy.
No. Other than, okay, cool. We're gonna see our first legitimate parasite appointed to federal office.
Yeah,
RFK Jr.'s brainworm.
exactly.
Well, what kind
And
of
of course, the brainworm is going to want to get rid of vaccines, of
Yeah,
course, you know,
absolutely.
and probably get rid of all parasite treating medications, of course.
Yeah. I wonder who that would be good for. Maybe
Brain
the
marks.
brainworm. Watch out, big brainworm is coming for you.
All right, what were you saying, Sparrow?
oh, I was just saying, um, in all seriousness, I mean, what do we think that he's going to want to change? What is he going to do?
In one interview, I heard him say that he wasn't going to get rid of anybody's vaccines. He's just going to make sure that all the information and the studies and everything are out there so that people can make an informed decision. I'm like, they already did those.
Yeah,
Mhm.
It's out there. People just got to have the motivation to go click it on, look it up in Google. You can
No, he
find
just
it.
wants to be able to put out different information that is misinformation.
Yeah, I believe so.
He wants
He will highlight like very minimal side effects, like if it's only happened like maybe once or twice out of every 10,000 people, he's going to make that a big deal, or even less. I mean, for example, way back in the 70s when I got my very first smallpox vaccine, I got a heck of a rash from it. But apparently that happened to people, and I just happened to
Mm-hmm.
be one of the lucky ones. But I mean, he'll make a big deal out of the rash, and I mean that was a
Yeah.
temporary thing for a damn near permanent protection from smallpox.
Mhm.
So I was fine with the little rash that I got. Chickenpox was way worse than the rash I got from that vaccine.
Mm-hmm. I mean, so it's like, old brainworm, still is one of those people that tries to hammer that there is a link between childhood vaccination and autism. Something that, number one, has never been substantiated in any scientific study and has actually been disproven in many studies. Yes, pesticides, yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And also, like, another thing to talk about, um, with his Children's Health Defense Fund, number one, but also something from an interview with CNN. The Trump Vance transition team, one of the co-chairs, a guy named Howard Lutnick, um, on CNN the week before the election, that Kennedy was seeking federal data to prove that vaccines should be taken off the market. But then Wednesday, Kennedy tries to water this down a bit in an interview with NBC, trying to say that he's never been anti-vaccine, and then just goes on to say,
What?
yeah, goes on to say, quote, if vaccines are working for somebody, I'm not going to take them away. People ought to have choice, and that choice ought to be informed by the best information, which is complete nonsense. Um,
Wow.
but
Well,
but
that's not what he was saying before, though.
no, that's not what he was saying before. But one good thing is that the president does not have the power to ban vaccines,
Well,
and also neither does the head of the HHS.
see, I'm gonna have to look back into more of his past, RFK, because
Mm-hmm.
about the time he got the brainworm, is that when he picked up the roadkill bear and then dropped it in Central Park and then decapitated the whale and took its head with the whale juice all leaking inside the van?
I don't know. I don't
I'm
know.
so I'm curious if it's RFK that did those things or the brainworm.
I mean, you know, that's
Oh,
that's
it's
possible.
all
That's
one and the same now.
I mean, like, okay, so like, there's not actually a like to all joking and all kidding aside, there's not actually a worm inside of his head. They did find a dead worm inside of his brain, and it was like a larval tapeworm or something like that. And so while I will jokingly refer to as stuff being done by the brainworm as opposed to RFK Jr., no, RFK Jr. really is that kind of a
Oh yeah,
madman.
he's definitely that crazy.
Like, he's that crazy. He's that crazy sans brainworm. Like that. Yeah,
The brainworm couldn't handle living inside him, so
it
it
was.
unalived itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was too crazy. So the brainworm decided to take the big
Oh
sleep on
oh
itself.
oh wait, come on. Could you imagine being caught inside that head?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, especially considering, like, everybody. I'm trying to figure out how RFK Jr. lives inside his own head, because let's be serious here. Because everybody's voice appears a bit deeper to themselves than it does everybody else, and this has to do with skull and jaw resonance. Imagine having that level of spasmodic dysphonia that RFK Jr. does, and have that echoing inside your brain and not go crazy.
Right. Right.
Hmm.
His voice alone. I mean, can you imagine him giving big speeches, like long
Ah.
speeches?
Mm.
See, that's why they want him. Is that's when they're going to roll out all their heinous shit. Is they're going to make it where he has to be the one on stage talking
And
about it,
people
because
tune it
nobody's going
out.
to want to listen to it.
Yep, people will tune it right out.
Nobody's going to want to listen to it.
That's a good plan.
Very, his voice is very grating.
Yeah.
It is. It is.
Know someone else that has a more normal voice but grates on me just as much? Marjorie
Hmm.
Taylor Greene.
Oh yeah.
Old
That's
Marge.
because that's big. I think that's because honestly, whenever she opens her mouth, either it becomes a leakage of industrial grade stupid, or she shoves her foot so far down her throat that toenails poke out of her skirt.
Yeah. See, according to her, Reagan didn't build the space lasers. The Israelis did.
Yeah, well, according to her, AIDS wasn't real, so.
And the Democrats can control the weather.
Oh, yeah.
Although, in all honesty, if either party could control the weather, I'd probably vote for that party.
Yeah, but if either party could control the weather, I don't think we would be dealing with the levels of climate change insanity that we currently are.
No, we would not.
If there was
So
actually a party that had control over the weather patterns, like the whole thing of like the Democrats caused the hurricane through sky seeding is ridiculous, considering that hurricanes are largely formed based on ocean water temperatures,
Exactly.
not sky seeding, not water vapor collection in the lower atmosphere.
Oh,
That's not how weather works, people.
Trump will get
Um,
a second chance to nuke a hurricane.
yeah,
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 he wanted to
yeah.
do that last time. Now he's got his chance.
Well, I mean, considering that we've done every other kind of nuclear test, we just got to wait for a hurricane to hit the Bikini Atoll and then just go nuke that
Oh
town.
yeah. Well, of course. Wait, no, we would not nuke a hurricane. We'd nuke a cyclone because they're on the other side of the world.
Oh, yeah, yep, yep. Bikini Atoll. That would be cyclone at
Yeah.
that point, not a hurricane. You're right.
Yep. We
You're
we
right.
that would be the
We'd have to
test,
make we have, but still, I think the only way they'd actually nuke the hurricane is if it somehow was potentially going to threaten Martha's Vineyard.
right? Well, last night when Elijah was here and we were talking, and he brought up the Jones Act, and I looked that up again because I know I had read something about it, and
Yeah.
I thought it really affected the prices in Puerto Rico, and I was right. It does because anything that's imported to Puerto Rico has to land here in the mainland first. It can't just go straight to the island.
Right. So Puerto Rico is going to get double tariffed, and it's going to
Oh
destroy
yeah,
them. It's going to completely annihilate their economy.
yeah. It has been for generations, so it's just going to get worse. They need statehood. It was supposed to be triggered by if the island itself, the people that live there, voted for it 3 times to become a state. That was supposed to trigger it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they did that 3 times. They voted to
And
be
they've
a
remained
state,
a protectorate.
and they're still a territory. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So
Puerto Rico, like at this point, we treat Puerto Rico like baby Cuba, except we actually trade with them.
and really old white people where I live after the hurricane said, "Why do we have to help the Puerto Ricans?" Um, I tried to correct them, but they don't get it that they're Americans.
Yeah.
Same as you, they're born American. They're Americans.
Yeah. Like even American Samoa,
Yeah,
that's America.
Guam. You're born on Guam. You're an American.
Yeah.
So yeah, um, and they didn't get that. No, they're Puerto Ricans. I go, no, they're Americans who live in Puerto Rico. You
I
know,
mean,
they
like
have a
like
very
I can understand they were confused, like why maybe the British helped out the Falklands or something because they're on opposite sides of the
oh
planet.
yeah.
But
The
I have a sneaking suspicion as to why they are not viewed as Americans.
could it be because they're brown?
That's what I
Yeah,
think.
up here.
I don't know. See, that's the thing is like I know plenty of Puerto Ricans that look like friggin' Rick Astley in the '80s. I'm not joking. I'm not joking. A good friend of mine when I was in high school was Puerto Rican, born there, raised there. He was third generation Puerto Rican.
Ooh,
His name was Luis Perez, and he spoke with a very, very thick accent. Except he was 6'4", freckled with curly red hair,
Oh wow.
and was so white that you could have slapped him in the face with sour cream and not told the difference. So I don't think it's entirely that.
well, when
I honestly I think that it's the assumption that they are all brown people.
they're not all brown, just like all Cubans aren't brown. When I went to visit my brother in
Right.
Florida, we went to this market that was a Cuban market, and they range from dark brown to white. So
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
the Caribbean islanders can come in any skin
Yeah.
color, really.
It's just melanation is gradated
Yep.
based on where you're
Well,
at.
I'm
Go
not sure.
figure.
Zero put in white supremacy with a question mark in the chat. I'm not quite sure what he meant by that.
I think he's talking about that came in as we were talking about the Puerto Rican question,
Ah,
uh, that you raised.
yeah.
Um, I don't necessarily think it's that specifically, or nothing so naked as that. At least maybe not in the terms that people understand the phrase white supremacy. But Sparrow, I see you got the next item on the list. Go ahead and throw that at us.
Get it.
Yeah, my next
That's a
item
good
on the
one.
list is NATO.
Well,
Ah,
wait. Let's get your opinion on that first. What do
yes,
you
please.
think's going to happen?
Probably nothing good.
Well, he did make a promise, so
Okay, and what was the promise? What was the promise again?
that he would pull us out of NATO, or he would
That's
at least
right.
threaten to.
Mm-hmm.
So
So what do we think? Is that going to happen? I don't think it's going to happen. I think he's going to try, but I don't think it's going to happen.
I
Yeah,
I
I mean, he may make moves. I don't necessarily think that the chief executive has the total control necessary to pull us out of NATO.
yeah, it's a treaty, isn't it? Isn't it up
Yeah,
to the House?
North Atlantic Treaty
Yeah,
Organization.
it's Congress.
Yeah, so it would have to be it would actually have to be an act of Congress. Like he could throw out an executive order saying that we're going to lend zero support to NATO, thus violating NATO. Um, for the duration of his presidency, but that's about all that he personally could do. Do I think there's enough hardcore political capital that is on Trump's side in the houses of Congress to undo NATO? I don't think so. I honestly don't.
I do believe that he will use the threat of it as a cudgel to get people to do, to get countries to just bend to his
Oh
will.
yeah.
He's going to
Oh yeah.
threaten, yeah, I'll just leave NATO and you guys be on your own.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He will definitely do that. Uh, he'll definitely do that. He'll. I'm just waiting for him to threaten to leave the UN. I mean, he won't, but I want to see what happens if he threatens it. I want to see what the reaction to that would be.
But weirdly, I don't think
Especially
I've ever heard him say anything like that. So that
no,
would be
but
a
like
new one.
that would be a new one. That would be a new one. But I wouldn't put it past him to get butthurt because as many times as he has been lambasted by the UN throughout the course of his first term and throughout his time not as president, it would not surprise me if he got butthurt enough to say something stupid like that. Um, but I wonder what the implications of that would be. I wonder what the UN might try to do at that point.
Well, first
Um,
thing they're going to have to do is move their damn headquarters.
yeah, number one. Then number two, they might. The other thing is they might revisit um, whether or not permanency should exist on the Security Council.
Yeah.
Because if they do that, that might actually end up being a positive thing. Because what most people don't realize is that two permanent members of the United Nations Security Council
China and Russia.
are our enemies,
Yeah.
are our like economic enemies. That's China and Russia and the Russian Federation. A lot of people don't realize that.
Yep.
And they're also the ones in charge. There also the five biggest the five permanent members of the UN Security Council contains three of the largest arms traffickers in world history, and they are China, Russia, and the United States.
Yeah, we sell a lot of guns.
That's not just a funny closer quote from Lord of War. Even though I'm sure people don't even remember that movie. It was
I do.
2006.
Oh my god, I've watched
I
that
do.
movie so many times.
So have I. It's a great movie. A lot of nonsensical things in it, but it's still a good movie.
So I loved it when Trump was initially talking about NATO back, like during his first term, and
Okay.
and it was quite obvious he did not understand how NATO, the treaty itself, works, and apparently thought there was a big piggy bank that we all chipped into,
Mm-hmm.
and
Didn't it, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but didn't at one point didn't he say NATO stood for North American Trade Organization?
I don't know. Oh, and
I want
oh
to say that
God, let's
I
not
want
even.
to say that he like grossly misstated what NATO stood for at one point.
I simple.
So
That
You
wouldn't
okay?
surprise me.
Quick answer on this question. Did either of you know a lot about NAFTA?
oh, the free trade agreement?
Yeah.
Yeah. What about it?
Well,
Because we
it
got NAFTA, we got CAFTA.
it got replaced though with the USMCA, didn't it? Trump's version.
Not totally replaced. Like there are still like it wasn't complete. Like okay, so NAFTA and CAFTA were not completely undone by the USMCA, but a lot of policies under that were gutted. Yes.
It got changed a lot, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. Like it basically gutted any actual trade support we sent or provided to Mexico. It
right,
basically ended virtually all support to Mexico and Central America.
right. And I mean, what do you think he's going to do next time? This time coming up. I mean, he wanted more than the USMCA, but that was the best he could get through at the time.
Yeah. Honestly, I think he's going to try and cut off Canada. And in all honesty, this sounds really dumb.
Well, wait,
Um,
we'd lose those tar sands, and
no, I
he
think
wants
he might.
he's going to reauthorize that pipeline, of course.
Yeah, he'll
Hmm.
reauthorize the pipeline, but also I would not put it past him to try and start negotiations to annex parts of Canada. I know it sounds crazy. I know it does. I know it sounds insane, but
Like which parts?
well, obviously the parts the pipelines go through first and foremost. Like he would probably try to like carve out a small chunk of Canada.
Wow.
I would probably say it would probably be Saskatchewan.
So
Lots of natural resources,
we're
a
gonna
lot of
invade
exploitable timber.
Canada. That's a
I don't
hell.
know if we're going to invade Canada, but I wouldn't be surprised if he tried to if he tried to buy some of it.
Well, I think the people that live there would have something to say about that. We don't want to be American. They don't.
Well, same with Scotland. He did the same thing with his golf course. He just basically
Yeah.
bullied them off their own property.
Uh huh. I mean, like, and if anything, it would truthfully be the most American thing he could do.
Yep.
I mean, what did the United States do to Native American tribes for 400 years?
Oh yeah.
Well, the United States for its entire existence, plus colonial America and the times before that. So you know,
Yeah. As soon as
I
white
mean, I
people
mean,
showed up on
I
this
mean,
continent, it was bad for the
we've
indigenous people.
yeah, we've had 400 separate treaties with Native American tribes throughout the course of American history. We have violated every single one of them.
Everyone. I have one here. I found one in a library that was just going. They were closing the library and they were selling everything.
Hmm.
And I found a book on the treaties from back then. I was like, wow. And it's a really, really old book. It's put away, but
Oh yeah,
I was very impressed. I read through a few of them and I was like, oh yeah, we violated that. Oh, and
Oh
we
yeah,
and we definitely violated all of this one.
yeah.
You know,
Basically, every time it was like, we're gonna stick every Native American we can find on what we think is just this weird, desolate patch of land.
and
Oh wait, we found precious metals there.
yeah,
Then you can move again.
and there's some worse land over here, but
Yeah,
most of these treaties were with the tribes from the Northeast. You know, like New York,
yeah.
Pennsylvania, and yeah, it's embarrassing when you read them.
Oh
Like,
yeah, especially the ones with the Narragansett people. Oh man, we fucked them over bad.
so yeah. Well,
Hey, maybe with Space Force, he'll try to uh, he'll
Colonize the
try to
moon.
land on an asteroid and mine an asteroid for the precious metals.
well,
Eh, Probably they've been talking about wanting to do that for probably close to 40 years.
that'd be a quick way to become a trillionaire.
Yeah, yeah. Except you already kind of need to be a trillionaire to pull that off in the first
Exactly.
place.
I was thinking it wouldn't it be easier to go get the asteroid and tow it into orbit around the Earth than mine it here?
Possibly, but then you have the question of like, where in low Earth orbit do we put it with all the satellites and shit that we have
Oh, we
that are
don't.
kind of sitting in that zone?
No, we'll put it in a geosynchronous orbit so we can always drop the ore that we get from it in the same place.
True, true. That's possible, but mm, most of the reason why satellites stay in geosync orbit is because they have, rockets attached to them, and that's another expense that uh, Bezos or Musk are not going to want to really have to pay for to
Well, first off,
keep
you're
keep the
gonna
big rock in the
you're
right place.
you're gonna have to get some really good physicists to tell you where to put the rockets to nudge the asteroid to get into the right orbit.
True.
And then once you get it here, like you said, you could probably leave those rockets attached to it to adjust it every now and again. But you know, I think it would be profitable, but the investment to do that would be
Would be
crazy. Yeah, it'd
astronomical,
be
literally
astronomical.
and
You'd
figuratively.
have to have Bezos and Musk and probably Branson and a few others all working together.
Hmm. Yeah, and then they would probably one of them would be stupid and crash the precious metals market.
Right. Well,
That would be the first thing that happens.
do you think with the second Trump presidency, maybe we can hope for a zombie apocalypse? I don't
I
know.
I
mean,
don't know.
at this point, that's the only thing left on Apocalypse Bingo is for a zombie
Zombies,
apocalypse.
yeah. Some outbreak of some disease that turns you into a zombie.
Yep. Let's bring on the clickers. Let's
Yep.
bring on the clickers. Let's get the cordyceps shit and rock and roll, people.
Oh man. I always said the
Well,
closest thing you'd ever get to zombies and would be like if rabies wasn't fatal.
Yeah, or fungal infection.
Yeah.
The whole cordyceps thing was an interesting take by the people who did.
Well,
What was it, Last of Us?
and whatever those worms are that cause grasshoppers to jump into the water because grasshoppers hate water.
I believe it's prions of some kind or whatever.
It's a worm. It's actually a worm that looks like a blade of grass, and it gets right in the back of their head, and
Mm.
it makes them go jump in water so that a fish will eat it, and that's where it completes its life cycle in the guts of fish.
Huh,
they
that's
get
cool.
into, and the same thing gets into praying mantis.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
bores right in the back of their head, makes them jump in the water.
Hmm.
Well, we have covered all of my list items.
Wow. So we can
Let's open
freelance.
up to more audience questions if there are any.
Well,
And
Zero S isn't RFK already a zombie? And I'm
No,
well,
no, the worm in his head was dead.
yeah. Well, the worm in his head's a zombie.
Yeah, yeah. The worm in his head is a zombie, and RFK controls it.
Oh my goodness. So, what do we really have to look forward to? Him breaking it for the next 2 years, probably, and then the midterms, and maybe we can put the brakes on the damage there for a little bit,
Maybe.
depending.
It all depends on what kind of game the Democrats play for the next 2 years.
Well, they need to start campaigning now.
Yeah.
I mean, right now.
Mhm.
Yeah, they need to contest every single seat that they can. They are probably going to completely distance themselves from Kamala Harris. She's
Mhm.
not gonna. She won't run 2028. I can basically guarantee that she will not run in 2028.
You know who I think they're gonna. You know who I think they're gonna run in 2028?
Huh?
Shapiro. I'm just
Hmm.
guessing, but I mean that's my prediction. We'll see what happens.
Yeah,
With
it's hard to
Shapiro.
say.
Josh Shapiro, governor of Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay, okay. I could see that. I could see that happening.
I mean, in a state that just flipped red, he's still pretty popular.
Yeah,
I don't know how, but he is.
yeah. Um, that's yeah. Trying to think. I'm trying to think of who they would dust off from the Republican camp. Because like, are we going to see them go even more crazy and it end up being Shapiro versus Shapiro, and they drag Ben Shapiro's ass off the Daily Wire and prop him up as the next snake oil salesman to try and elect, or
I hope
will or no, Gavin Newsom has no political capital. People, not even his own party, likes him.
right.
I mean,
Uh,
when
That's
you
true.
try to think of
well,
other standout Democrats, right? I mean, one that comes to mind would be like Tim Walz because he was running with Kamala Harris. That will probably get him.
I think that'll do more damage,
Yeah,
do more harm than good.
that's what I mean.
I think that pretty much killed his political career at the federal level. He'll go back to being governor, and he will stay governor. And also, as he's been governor, he's not really popular with his own constituents. And so, just like with
Ooh,
Newsom,
zero
AOC, no,
AOC. No, I
it
don't
it
see it going that
it
way
won't
either.
happen. That one definitely won't happen. Um,
But I mean, Shapiro is the guy that they could get him in there.
Josh Shapiro is safe enough for white people for sure. Um, who the Republicans would run against him?
JD
That's
Vance,
a
man,
big kicker.
he's the VP.
I
Isn't he
don't
a
think it'll
shoe
be
in?
JD Vance. I don't think it'll be Vance. Um, I think they may try to run Matt Gaetz.
Oh God, no. Oh God, no.
What about
I
DeSantis?
They may try to run DeSantis. DeSantis may be the one they try to run at that point.
Rubio?
If not, if it, like I honestly think it'll probably be DeSantis or Gaetz.
Not Gates. Think Ted Cruz will run again?
No, no, I think Ted Cruz has gotten to the point where he's fairly content just staying a lifetime senator of Texas, and he will probably try to angle maybe for uh, uh, a federal judicial appointment at some point because he's still young enough
Right.
that if he gets appointed to the judiciary, that he could potentially still end up on the Supreme Court. And I see that as something that he may try to do. But with his many failed presidential bids and all that, I don't see him getting picked for SCOTUS.
Matt Gates? Really?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
That guy's got like a
I,
ton of baggage, Joe.
he does have a ton of baggage, but he's really popular with his base. He's really popular with his constituency, and people who like Trump like Matt Gaetz.
Well,
As
we'll
like
have to wait and see.
as insane as it sounds, I would not be surprised to see Matt Gaetz as part of that ticket
Oh God, I
in
hope not.
2028.
I hope not. But
Like, if anything, like the worst case scenario, I think we would probably see a DeSantis Gates ticket.
but it's out there now. My prediction: Shapiro for the Democrats in 2028.
Josh Shapiro, Wes Moore. I don't know. What do we know about Wes Moore?
Wow, not enough.
Yeah, because if he didn't come to mind for me, then chances are no, Wes Moore probably not at all. I wouldn't honestly. I kind of wouldn't be surprised if potentially we might see Pete Buttigieg try and come back.
Oh,
Yeah,
he could
that's
definitely
very
do
possible.
you know, he could definitely do a run for president. I'd like to see
Like
that.
that might be something we see is potentially Pete Buttigieg.
And he's already got the recognition factor from Fox News.
Yeah, he
How
does.
old, how old is he now?
46.
40
I want
something,
to
yeah. I am not sure.
That's kind of what I thought.
say. He's 42. He's 42.
Yeah, I thought he was in his 40s.
Yeah,
So yeah, he can run.
yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, I see Buttigieg trying, potentially trying again. Um, I mean, he's currently he's the current transportation secretary, so
Right?
I mean, he's got some political capital now, more so than he did in 2016 for sure. Um, so I see that happening. Part of what I see happening is we're going to see. Um, I'd say yeah. As predictions for 2028, just real quick, I think what we'll probably see is further fracturing of the Republican Party. Is we'll see some diehard Republicans run, some old school Republicans run, and some Trumplicans, as I like to call them, run,
You, you, you,
and
you,
Trumplicans.
you
It rhymes with supplicant,
yeah.
and it seems fitting. As far as the Democratic side of things, I also think that since there's going to be such a void in the Democratic Party as far as political capital goes for the next 4 years. I think we're going to see another 2016 situation where we have a bunch of people running, and primaries are going to be brutal for both parties, um, unless people stay as diehard Trumplicans, in which case the Republicans will have an easy primary,
Then
and DeSantis will take the
well,
Republican ticket.
then again, between now and 2028, we could have another Barack Obama come out of nowhere. You know.
It's possible. It's possible, but we've had that happen twice in American history,
Yeah, pretty much.
and Obama was the only one of the two that actually ended up working out. The other one was Zachary was Zachary Pierce,
So
or not Zachary. Yeah, it was Pierce. It was Pierce. I don't know if it was Zachary or a different first name.
Benjamin, isn't
And
it?
that, huh?
Is it Benjamin?
No,
No.
no.
What is his first name? Franklin.
Uh,
Damn, what is his first name?
yeah. Franklin Pierce.
Franklin Pierce. Yeah, that sounds right. But yeah, but you know,
Yeah, it was Franklin Pierce.
it
It was
could
Franklin Pierce.
happen out of nowhere. A freshman senator could just start taking America by storm again. It happened. Could
It could
happen
happen.
again. Just need that
It could
kind of
happen. I mean,
charisma, and you know,
but like I said, it's happened once before Obama, and it was Franklin Pierce, though he relied heavily on Nathaniel Hawthorne, the guy who wrote the Scarlet Letter, who wrote a book called a pseudo what I call a pseudo biography called The Life and Times of Franklin Pierce, which painted him out to be like this kind of dark horse candidate that was like a cross between Mother Teresa and James Bond. Um, and then he got elected, and he sucked. He sucked a lot. He was terrible. Like he did a lot to cause problems because the two things he is most known for were signing the Kansas Nebraska Act and enforcing the Fugitive Slave Acts. Those are the things that Franklin Pierce is most known for, and most people don't realize this, but Franklin Pierce is the grandfather of Barbara Pierce. And the reason why that's important is because Barbara Pierce married George Herbert Walker Bush,
Wow.
making it one of the oldest political dynasties in American history.
Wow.
Yep.
Well,
Mhm.
that seems like a sad note to end this thing on, but wow.
I hate to say it, but yeah.
You know, I don't think we have any more questions. So, are are we about done? I mean,
I think we kind of are, unless we have any more questions from the audience.
I don't think so. We've covered just about the entire apocalypse to come. So,
Yeah. Only other thing we could do at this point is just go through line by line of Project 2025, and we may need to do a show on that at some point, where it's like, after the first 100 days, we dust off Project 2025 and we see how many of what happens in Trump's first 100 days
that's a good
were in
idea.
2025.
That's a good idea.
I think we should do that.
We should
Yeah,
set that up. That's a good idea. So yeah,
I
that's a little more.
agree.
That gives us something to do.
Yeah.
So, well, I guess with that we're gonna end this show, and I'd like to thank everybody for coming. Was really fun covering the apocalypse with you guys.
Yeah, and if you feel so inclined, please hit the like button and subscribe, share, all that good stuff, helping us out.
Etc.
Etc. And
We appreciate it.
yeah, yeah. And to end it off, I'll say one thing, a great little mock Latin phrase that I've become fond of is Nolite te bastardes carburandorum. It's from Margaret
Don't
Atwood.
let the bastards get you
Yeah,
down.
yep, from Margaret Atwood. I like that one.
I love that. I love that one.
You're welcome. That one's for you, Sparrow.
And with that,
Thank you.
peace, everyone.